What's up, everybody? Welcome to another World Cup preview here on Touchline Talk. Before I jump in, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week on YouTube. You can also find all of my written work, including the written World Cup previews, both on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, as well as on Medium. Officially into Group F, starting with Belgium. This is Belgium's 14th World Cup appearance. I'm not going to list all of them. Third in a row. It had been a while, but Belgium got back in 2014, made it again in 2018, and are now returning for a third consecutive World Cup in 2022. The best finish Belgium has had was 2018, that third place finish. They've gotten to the semifinals, ended up third at this last World Cup, so that is the best they have ever done. To get here, not incredibly difficult or challenging. Belgium picked up 20 points from their 8 games against Belarus, Czech Republic, Estonia, and Wales in their UEFA qualifying group. They had a plus 19 goal differential. That was the highest of any of the UEFA teams that were in one of the 5-team groups rather than the 6-team groups. So those 16 groups played extra games, which kind of messes with the full goal differential comparison. But of the teams who only played 8, Belgium, best goal difference, got through with ease to book their spot in Qatar. Players to know, there are going to be some familiar names, starting in net with Thibaut Courtois. Courtois at this point has 3 La Liga titles, 1 with Atletico Madrid, 2 with Real Madrid, 2 Premier League titles, both with Chelsea. He's been one of the best goalkeepers in the world. He has been the goalkeeper for this entire Belgian stretch where they've become one of the best teams in the world over these past 8 or so years, really starting with that 2014 World Cup. And recently he reached an entire new level with what he did at the Champions League final. It was one of the best goalkeeping performances you are ever going to see. He won man of the player of the match, deservingly so. He is as big a reason as any outside of Karim Benzema that Real Madrid won that Champions League. He was sensational. He has been sensational. He's, been the goalkeeper for some of the biggest clubs in the world. He's played in multiple World Cups. He checks every single box. He's been sensational. He is one of the best goalkeepers in the world and an important part of this Belgium team. Number 2, it's Kevin De Bruyne, obviously. 2 goals, 4 assists in his previous 2 World Cups. He also has 3 assists at European Championships. I could go on and on about Kevin De Bruyne. I still believe Kevin De Bruyne is underrated, as hard as that is to comprehend. He is easily the best creative midfielder in the world. That is not a discussion. He's been terrorizing everybody since he got to Manchester City. Didn't exactly work the first go-round in the Premier League with Chelsea, but he got to Pep Guardiola and it all got figured out pretty quickly there. And he's been absolutely sensational. His ability to score goals, to rip open defenses with his passing, there is no other player in the world like him. And to prove my point about him being underrated, Kevin De Bruyne finished 3rd in the Ballon d'Or voting for 2022 that was just announced a few weeks before I'm recording this at the end of October here. That was the first time Kevin De Bruyne had finished in the top 7 of Ballon d'Or voting. You cannot tell me over the last 5 to 8 years, at no point was Kevin De Bruyne a top 7 player in the world until last season. That is preposterous. Now, I understand, he doesn't have the Champions Leagues to point to. He's surrounded by all of these terrific players in Manchester City. So the value is hard to point to. Because, and also national team-wise, he's been surrounded by terrific talent with Belgium as well. It's not like he's carrying teams because he just doesn't have to. But the final piece of evidence, if you're looking for one, is already what he has been able to do with Erling Haaland at his disposal. Yes, all of those players around him are fantastic. Nobody elevates somebody else quite like Kevin De Bruyne. He is just assist after assist to Erling Haaland because you can't stop him and you can't stop De Bruyne and you sure can't stop them together. He's taken it, his game hasn't gone to a whole new level, but he's shown a different dimension because now you're giving him Holland to work with as well. They've been breathtaking to watch. He is absolutely sensational. He is the best player on, for my money, basically every team he's played on since he got to Manchester City. I know that's saying a lot. That's how highly I think of him. I could go on and on and on. Still think he's not appreciated fully, but finally he did get at least a top 3 Ballon d'Or finish to show for the incredible, 5+ seasons he's been, getting on a decade here of what he's been doing. In terms of, and then third, an interesting figure, Romelu Lukaku. Romelu Lukaku has more than twice as many goals as any other player that's ever suited up for the Belgian men's national team. Let's start there. Romelu Lukaku has more than 20 goal contributions on 7 different occasions with 4 different clubs in Europe's top 5 leagues. Most of that came in the Premier League, of course, and then he had that spectacular first stint with Inter Milan. Romelu Lukaku also has 8 goals in his last 2 major tournaments. Yes, club-wise, has not been going great. The return to Chelsea was a disaster. It just didn't work with Thomas Tuchel, and injuries have sidelined him since he went back to Inter on loan this season. I get all that. Assuming he is healthy and ready to go for this tournament and can be something close to 100%. I'm just not that concerned about it. This is a different world, and this is Kevin De Bruyne feeding him the ball. As good as those Chelsea players and as good as those Inter Milan players have been the ones sort of supporting him, they're not Kevin De Bruyne. And also, again, good production at Euro 2020, despite what is happening, sort of the struggles club-wise. He's not perfect, but when he was at his best with Inter Milan, when they won that Serie A title, he was at least a top 5 striker in the world, if not top 3. He was the focal point of everything they did. He can carry a team. Hasn't always been in the perfect situations. Hasn't delivered at the biggest clubs in the Premier League when he's gotten the opportunity. There are plenty of differing opinions on Romelu Lukaku. You still feel pretty good if he's your number 9 heading into a World Cup and Kevin De Bruyne is behind him. So, that is the third player to watch out for. No surprise, 3 big names who have been around, who have been delivering for this team, and some of the bigger names on the club stage as well. In terms of a breakout star, I'm going to go Amadou Onana. And this was a really difficult one because over the past couple years, so many young guys have sort of cycled in and out of this Belgian national team. Qualifying wasn't particularly challenging. You get to experiment a little bit in Nations League. The stakes just haven't been that high since Euro 2020. Onana only has 2 caps. Ironically, they both came against the Netherlands. But Lille last season, 32 appearances, 11 starts. That got him a move to Everton. He's been a consistent player for Everton so far. He is one of these guys who's kind of peaking at the right time and is in a position to potentially make this roster. I just don't have a good feel for what kind of the back third of this roster is going to look like. I don't think there are all that many guarantees at this moment in time once you get out of the obvious ones. And so this was a challenging one for me, but I feel like he's in a good position in kind of where, his status within the national team right now, what he's doing at the club level to not only make the team, but potentially make an impact for this team. So your breakout star to watch, Amadou Onana. On to the bottom line and the big question for this team. Well, first, the reason for optimism. It's all connected. You have Thibaut Courtois, Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, and Yuri Tillmans. That's as good as a quartet as any team in the world is going to bring to Qatar, assuming they are all available. It might be the very best. You can have a debate, but the Frances of the world, the Englands of the world, even the Brazils of the world, once you get out of those 1 or 2 obvious players, they kind of drop off a little bit. And that's kind of the case for Belgium. I'm also a big Yuri Tillmans guy, so maybe I'm a little bit biased in that sense that I just love that midfield duo so much. But the reality is, those four guys, you're going to be able to match up with anybody in terms of top end talent. That is your reason for optimism. I'll get to the big concern, the big question here in a minute. But you have the talent to win a World Cup. You got to have difference makers and guys who can be the best player on the field against the best teams in the world, and Belgium certainly have that. The big question, has the window closed? This is still going to be very similar to the 2014, 2018 squads. The ones you've seen at the European Championships in between. Just a much older version, a much less inspiring version, because outside of the guys I just mentioned, and Tillmans is the one guy who's kind of come in to refresh this over the past 5 years or so. But you're still talking about, those center backs, Axel Witsel, the Hazards. And by the way, this is not peak Chelsea Eden Hazard, who was terrifying everybody in the Premier League and got that massive move to Real Madrid. This is a shell of that. Nowhere close to the best version of this Belgium team in 2022 because it is so similar to the previous editions. That 2018 was the peak. And you're relying on a lot of the same players. A piece or two has come in. But most of them are sort of role players. The only real high-level guy, potentially world-class player you brought in is Yuri Tillmans. And so, to the question of has the window closed, do they have the ability to get enough out of the supporting cast that, because they should get out of this group, they're one of the best 16 teams in the world easily. When you start getting into a quarterfinal, a semifinal, trying to make a deep run in this tournament, and you're facing the Frances and the Englands and the Brazils and the Argentinas and the Spains of the world, do the supporting pieces give you enough to be able to sustain and kind of withstand, is probably the better word, the depth discrepancy? You're not bringing, Jack Grealish and Kingsley Coman and, Gabriel Jesus potentially for Brazil. You get the point. Those kind of guys off the bench here. That's not where this Belgian team is at. So when somebody has the firepower to match De Bruyne, Lukaku, Tielemans, a really good goalkeeper like Courtois, because there are a couple teams in the world that have something similar, is there enough behind those guys to stay with those teams? Or are they going to get exposed when maybe you got to play some extra time, you get a little bit tired, De Bruyne's not quite at it, De Bruyne gets injured, you don't have somebody to pick up that slack, potentially, or the ability to change a game if things aren't going well. You're limited in what you can do because you're so reliant on the top end of this roster. It's phenomenal talent, but there's not a lot after it at this point. The teams that are the favorites have this kind of talent at the top and then incredible depth, right? We're talking about before the injury situation with England's right backs. Can you afford to leave Trent Alexander-Arnold off of your team? That is not the conversation we're having about Belgium. So that is my question. Has this right? This is a golden generation, ridiculously talented. Haven't been incredibly underwhelming. They've been close, but they haven't gotten that trophy. They've got one more shot with some of these players in their prime. You're talking about sort of this 25 to 31 age range for the four guys I've been harping on: Courtois, De Bruyne, Lukaku, Tielemans. Most of the rest of the other guys who are going to play a key role are older than that. So this is your last go around with something resembling the 2018 team. They've been close. They haven't gotten it done. Do they have a real chance to get it done again? Or do they just not have the overall talent necessary at this point because they are not the most talented team in this tournament? They're in that tier 2 for me as teams I could see winning it because I think so highly of the best players on this team. But there is a clear gap between the very best, the favorites, and what Belgium is bringing to this tournament. That is all for the Belgium preview. As I said at the beginning, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.